Hello again, Steve here with a few of my comments on how I believe very strongly anyways that just because people think that we should be guilty for stuff doesn't necessarily mean we should. And I want to start this off by telling a little bit of a story and how this leads up to how I got to these thoughts, how I came to start thinking about this. Well, somebody on Facebook posted a couple days ago this video by a folk singer who I believe he said he was in Canada, this folk singer anyways, and it was about, the preface of it was that this story about the native Indians, North American Indians, natives, Aboriginal people or whatever, had been put into these residential schools back in the last century, mid-last century, where the concept was taking the Indian out of the Indian. They wanted to assimilate the native Indians into the broader society, so they thought that if they took them out of their culture, taught them the European language and the European religion, European culture and so on, that they would become westernized. Well, it was done by the churches in cahoots with the government in cahoots with the churches basically, and it ended up being a disaster because it was busted up a bunch of families is what it really did. That's the main thing that I think the main reason why it was so disastrous, which is not really talked about as much, but and the native Indian family to this day is really in tatters. But anyways, this guy, he had a lot of prelude, he had a lot of preamble about how he came to write this song, and how he started going on about this white privilege and this guilt and all this sort of thing, and that he wrote the song, but he didn't want to sing it right away because he wanted to get permission from some Indian guy or whatever. And I'm thinking, like, wow, buddy, like, you got a good song, just sing it. What do you need permission for? I mean, he was worried about appropriating and all this. I mean, he wasn't saying anything bad about them. It was all very respectful and stuff. So anyway, I just thought, it was like this collective guilt that he was carrying. And I made a comment on this post that, we have to be careful about this collective guilt, this white man's guilt that is being pushed over and over and over again by different groups, that somehow, because stuff was done way back in the day, that somehow today's version of white man is somehow responsible. And I push back on that and say, hang on a second here, I ain't responsible for this. And the reply that I got back was, we have to, but it's great to have empathy. And sure, of course it's great to have empathy. That's a natural, a healthy human being is going to have empathy, Like my ancestors on my namesake side, they came from Ireland several hundred years ago. They left Ireland because they were starved out of Ireland by the English. Well, I have empathy for those people. Of course I do. I have empathy for the people who, were victims of the Holodomor by the Soviets in the Ukraine, and they were millions starved out in the Ukraine during that period of time. Of course I have empathy for them. That was it's an atrocity against humanity. But how the hell am I responsible? How am I supposed to, what does it serve me or anybody else to carry the guilt of that? But it's a very common thing. It's a very common tactic that's used by, basically psychopathic charlatans. And in some case, maybe not psychopathic, maybe just charlatans, and maybe they don't even know they're charlatans. They're just going through this thing to get people on board. It's like patriotism. Very often the tactic used there is, these men fought and died for you, blah, blah, blah. What's that got to do with me? They didn't know me. I don't know them. I can be grateful for it, sure. But don't try to guilt me into it. That doesn't make any sense, right? And of course, religions use this over and over again. A good example, I grew up in the Christian cultural context. And you got this saying, that Jesus died for your sins, you better get down and kneel. Well, you know what? I mean, maybe he thought he was. But that was 2,000 years ago, and those guys back then, few people back then killed him. How am I supposed to feel guilty for that? Like, how does that make any sense? Doesn't make any sense to me. And I don't think it's healthy. I don't think it's healthy to own the sins of our forefathers, because there is no logical ownership there. And another thing that's going on around a lot now, which I push back on, and I hear it over and over again, and I hear it in, not long ago in a social setting, somebody was talking about how we're all treaty people. Because what's happening now in the area that I live in is there's these treaty negotiations going on with the Native Indians, and for greater rights and land rights and whatever it is, I don't know. And the tagline is now that more and more is that we're all treaty people. So it's like, we owe stuff to them. Hang on a second here. Oh. And I tell people this. I ask the question is, where did I sign this treaty? Why am I responsible? Why are you asking? Why are you going to use the guns of the state to steal from me? Because your tagline, we're all treaty people. No. I push back on that. Yes, injustice has been done. But where did I do it? And who did I do it to? Well, there's no answer to that, right? There's no answer to that. So I think we have to be, yes, empathetic. Yes, for sure. But owning it? And just because? No. And the people who are pushing this, of course, are, I would say they're charlatans, because it's using emotional guilt trip to get us to do stuff, not rational arguments. So what can we learn from this? I think that even though it sometimes feels, because of the guilt by association sort of trip that's put on us, guilt by racial association or something like that, I would say that it doesn't serve us, and it's not healthy to just automatically take on a guilt trip and take on the actual guilt and the responsibility for that guilt, for what we have objectively not been responsible for. And to talk about it. I think it's important. It's important to challenge people on this. Why are you responsible? Heck, not long ago I was at this social event where this guy was talking about how we're all treaty people. This guy is from China, a recent immigrant who'd come here a few years ago. And I'm thinking, how the heck are you responsible for, Native Indian treaties gone amok 200 years ago or 100 years ago? What's that got to do with you? No, but he works at a university, and it's just that, he's just parroting, as what I can see. And I was at another event not long ago where this guy was talking about, he went to Africa and stuff, and he was talking about how he had this white privilege and all that sort of thing. And I'm thinking, these people didn't make this shit up, right? Charlatans put these talking points into people's minds, and they learn it over and over again. They push it over and over and over again. And they start to somehow think that it's true. They don't think about it. So my challenge to people, and challenge to myself, is to think these things through, consider them. And how does it, so in this point today is, how does it make any sense for us to take on guilty conscience for things that happened way before we were born, to people who are no longer alive, by people who are, and probably perpetrated by people who are not even related to us? Because I can pretty much guarantee it that my father and my grandfather and his related family did not impose these institutional systems on the natives. And even if they did, even if my dad was part of the chain gangs that went around and rounded up these handcuff gangs that went around and rounded up these native kids, even if he was part of that, how does that make me guilty? No, it makes no sense whatsoever, right? I don't owe the debts of my dad when he dies. If he has a mortgage, if he has loans out, I'm not obliged to pay his debts unless I've agreed to. So why am I obliged to pay his debt of conscience? Makes no sense whatsoever. Yes, Natives who've been hard done by, Irish, Ukrainians, everybody the world over who's been hard done by. And if we look back in history, everybody has been. Sorry, unless I'm directly implicated, I'm not responsible. And yes, there are things that I have done in life that I am guilty for because I actually did involve myself. It happens to be with usually interpersonal relations. I did something stupid, said something stupid to somebody. And there is legitimate reason for grievance. And I do my best to reconcile that stuff and still work on it. But things that happened generations before, I'm sorry. I'm sorry they happened. They happened to my people going back too. They happened to everybody's people. But I just fail to see as to how just because some charlatan is telling me that, yeah, these treaties are mine too. Sorry, buddy. I didn't sign them. They're not part of me. I didn't come to this country voluntarily. I didn't join this so-called treaty land. No. I was born here. And as far as I know, I didn't make a choice. So, not my deal. Not my deal, and I'm going to push back on it, and you can say it all you want, but hey, it ain't. Steve here again, great chatting. If you like what I'm doing, please like, subscribe, and share, and please comment in the box below. Talk again soon. Bye for now.